Venerable Anthony of the Kiev Caves, founder of monasticism in Russia, commemorated on July 10th, Saint Anthony of the Kiev Caves was born in the year 983 at Lubeck, not far from Chernigov, and was named Antipas in baptism. Possessing the fear of God from his youth, he desired to be clothed in the monastic schema. When he reached a mature age, he wandered until he arrived on Mount Athos, burning with the desire to emulate the deeds of its holy inhabitants. Here he received monastic tonsure, and the young monk pleased God in every aspect of his spiritual struggles on the path of virtue. He particularly excelled in humility and obedience, so that all the monks rejoiced to see his holy life. The igumen saw in St. Anthony the great future ascetic, and inspired by God, he sent him back to his native land, saying, "Anthony, it is time for you to guide others in holiness. Return to your own Russian land and be an example for others. May the blessing of the holy mountain be with you." Returning to the land of Rus, Anthony began to make the rounds of the monasteries about Kiev, but nowhere did he find that strict life which had drawn him to Mount Athos. Through the providence of God, Anthony came to the hills of Kiev by the banks of the river Dnieper. The forested area near the village of Berestovo reminded him of his beloved Athos. There he found a cave which had been dug out by the priest Hilarion, who later became Metropolitan of Kiev, October 21st. Since he liked the spot, Anthony prayed with tears, "Lord, let the blessing of Mount Athos be upon this spot and strengthen me to remain here." He began to struggle in prayer, fasting, vigil, and physical labor. Every other day or every third day, he would eat only dry bread and a little water. Sometimes he did not eat for a week. People began to come to the ascetic for his blessing and counsel, and some decided to remain with the saint. Among Anthony's first disciples was Saint Nikon, March 23rd, who tonsured Saint Theodosius of the Caves, May 3rd, at the Monastery in the year 1032. The virtuous life of Saint Anthony illumined the Russian land with the beauty of monasticism. Saint Anthony lovingly received those who yearned for the monastic life. After instructing them how to follow Christ, he asked Saint Nikon to tonsure them. When 12 disciples had gathered about Saint Anthony, the brethren dug a large cave and built a church and cells for the monks within it. After he appointed Abbot Barlaam to guide the brethren, Saint Anthony withdrew from the monastery. He dug a new cave for himself, then hid himself within it. There, too, monks began to settle around him. Afterwards, the saint built a small wooden church in honor of the Dormition of the Mother of God over the far caves. At the insistence of Prince Izyaslav, the igumen Barlaam withdrew to the Dmitriev Monastery. With the blessing of St. Anthony and with the general agreement of the brethren, the meek and humble Theodosius was chosen as igumen. By this time, the number of brethren had already reached 100 men. The Kiev great Prince Izyaslav, 1078, gave the monks the hill on which the large church and cells were built, with a palisade all around. Thus, the renowned monastery over the caves was established. Describing this, the chronicler remarks that while many monasteries were built by emperors and nobles, they could not compare with those which are built with holy prayers and tears, and by fasting and vigil. Although St. Anthony had no gold, he built a monastery which became the first spiritual center of Rus. For his holiness of life, God glorified St. Anthony with the gift of clairvoyance and wonder-working. One example of this occurred during the construction of the Great Caves Church. The Most Holy Theotokos herself stood before him and St. Theodosius in the Blacherny Church in Constantinople, where they had been miraculously transported without leaving their own monastery. Actually, 2 angels appeared in Constantinople in their forms. See May 3rd, the account of the Kiev Caves icon of the Most Holy Theotokos. Having received gold from the Mother of God, the saints commissioned master architects who came from Constantinople to the Russian land on the command of the Queen of Heaven to build the church at the Monastery of the Caves. During this appearance, the Mother of God foretold the impending death of St. Anthony, which occurred on July 10th, 1073. Through divine providence, the relics of St. Anthony remain hidden.
Ave